introducing our speaker for today, we have Heather Fleming, which is really exciting. Heather is a design and innovation expert who began her career in Silicon Valley before founding Catapult Design in 2008, focusing on underserved communities. And as a co-founder and the executive director for Change Labs, she has played a key role in supporting Native American entrepreneurs and both on Navajo and Hopi nations. And Heather is Diné, Peace Nesbitt, and she belongs to the Bitutni clan. So welcome, Heather. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Raquel. Hi, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces on this call. Hi, Erin and Vanessa and Kelsey. Raise your hand if you can't hear me or if we're having any of those sorts of issues. And while I pull up my slides, I'm popping a question into the chat window for all of you guys. I really want to know what questions you have that brought you here today, because I want to make sure I try and answer as many of the popular questions as we can. So go ahead and ponder on that question a little bit while I pull up the slide deck that I want to share today, and we'll get started. And of course, if you're too scared to type in the chat, feel free to unmute yourself. Oh yes, Raquel did ask about what that protocol would be like. I totally mind if you take a phone call and let us all hear it, but I don't mind at all if you unmute yourself to ask like if I say something that's confusing and you want an answer right then and there, feel free to interrupt. I will make a point to pause every now and then and make sure there's nothing in the chat that needs my attention and just say like, does anybody have any questions about this particular concept? All right. So everyone's too afraid to type a question in the chat, or you guys earnestly have no questions about starting a nonprofit. I really don't believe that. So going once, going twice. Ooh, yes, Erin, how do we secure startup funding? Oh man, we are going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about like funding diversification too. So that's an excellent question. Is this about Arizona nonprofits versus nonprofit on Navajo? We're going to talk about both of those things too, because if you're on the reservation, you have the choice to register with both or one. So we'll talk about what that means and why you might choose one over the other. And this, if you're here from New Mexico or Colorado or even New York, it should still be relevant to you too. Structures of nonprofits in general. Okay, thanks, Kevin. I'll see if we get into that. Feel free to keep telling me what brought you here while I share with you the content that I had planned for today. And then maybe I'll pause again to see if I'm not covering things that you guys want to hear about. So I thought about the agenda like this. I thought, what are the things that one needs to do to start a 501c3? And then what are the things that may be in that logistical steps, which I've laid out here? What are the things that we don't talk about enough, or that maybe people don't know enough about? So the first step I have is like draft your mission, your vision, your business plan, your budget, and your bylaws, and establish a founding board of directors, even if it's just one or two people. Like when Change Labs started, it was just two people. Oh, hold up. Let me just share really quickly. In addition to being the executive director at Change Labs, Raquel mentioned that I previously started a company in San Francisco that was also a nonprofit. So if it helps, I have experience establishing two nonprofits, one in California that operated in Colorado. So we were registered in 2 states, and then Change Labs, which is registered Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, also the Navajo Nation. And I have about 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership and management. So if that helps a little bit with my credentials, I will say I'm not a lawyer. So I am 100% positive some questions are going to come up, even when we start talking about Form 1023 later on in the presentation. You guys might have questions that I really do think there are parts of this process where getting some legal expertise would really help. All right, so back to this map. Drafting your mission, vision, plan, your business plan, your budget, your bylaws, establishing a founding board. I want to talk about mission and vision. I know that one's kind of obvious, but because it's so important to everything else in your organization. I just wanted to touch on it again, like how critical it is that you have a concrete mission and vision that is measurable, that meets the IRS criteria, et cetera, et cetera. And then these steps here, like these are the logistical steps: establishing an employment identification number, incorporating your nonprofit in the places it does business. And then after you're doing those things, applying for tax exempt status. And while in parallel, while those activities are going on, there is also this question of, well, if you need money right away, or if you have people who want to donate to your cause, but you're not officially a nonprofit, how do you accept money in a legal way so that you can start your work while you're waiting to go through these months of paperwork? And then, of course, the last step in this logistical process is receiving your IRS determination letter, which is kind of like the stamp of approval that you're officially a nonprofit. You can operate as a nonprofit, you can accept grants, you can accept donations, et cetera, et cetera. It's like the birth of your organization. All right. Thank you all for the questions still coming in. Securing a building for a nonprofit, still a big challenge. Woo! I think I'm going to save that one for the Q&A, because we went through that at Change Labs, and yes, it's a challenge. Can we have 2 organizations under one 501c3? Excellent question. I'm going to keep going with what we're going to be talking about today. This is the second part of it: tips for building a 501c3. So I think of establishing and like setting something up as one distinct step, a milestone to be achieved, and then the actual work of building and strengthening the nonprofit as a completely separate activity. And you do often have to do these things in parallel. One's very logistical. The other is probably the reason why you want to start a nonprofit in the first place, the work, the fun stuff. So in what I think, or what we're going to cover today in the 5 steps are the 5 tips: ensuring that your business plan has multiple ways that your organization generates income, not just one. Defining your impacts. This is if you want to raise grant funding as a nonprofit, this one is super, super important. 3, investing in marketing and storytelling. I think it's something that we often forget to do. 4 is understanding what support you need to run this organization and to keep it open. Bookkeeping, tax preparation, graphic design, communications, grant writing, grant compliance, accounting are all things that come to mind. And then something that everybody struggles with is operationalizing the services you offer. So making your organization less chaotic, more streamlined. Like, everybody uses this project management tool. We all use this Gmail server. When we greet somebody, we all do it in this way, but just trying to create some cohesion within your nonprofit or your organization. So if that wasn't too convoluted of our agenda for today, I'm going to go back a little bit. The things in orange are the things that I'm going to talk about: mission and vision, your tax exempt status, fiscal sponsorship, ways of generating income, and defining your success. Those are the 5 things that I feel like we don't talk about enough when we're talking about creating nonprofits. All right, I'm going to move on. Let's talk about the very, very first one, your mission and vision. And again, this sounds obvious. I feel like I've never seen anybody skip this step, but because it's so critical, because you can't really build your business plan for your nonprofit if you don't have a mission and vision. You can't build a budget if you don't have a business plan that supports a mission and vision. And your bylaws, of course, is like, it's like the constitution of your organization, and you can't even draft your bylaws if you don't fundamentally know what it is that you're going to do and why you're doing it. So to me, this is the cornerstone of everything in your organization. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on it, even though I think everybody on this call already knows that you do need a mission and vision if you're starting a nonprofit. I think about it like this, for those of you who already have a nonprofit or are thinking about it, I do think that this statement here can serve both types of audiences. So if you already have a nonprofit, ask yourself this: What is the problem you want to solve, and why does this problem exist? Who is impacted by this problem? And how does your solution, what is your solution, and how does it serve the people impacted by this problem? Very basic, very generic, but it's still really, really hard to do. I feel like we struggled with Change Lab's mission statement for a very long time before settling on the one that we did. And even then, I think I have it in one of these slides, it's not something that we, like if you go to the Change Lab's website, it's possible you'd find our mission statement, but the mission is so generic, it's more logistical for us. Whereas we find all these other things to rally around to communicate our cause and why we do what we do. But the mission does, it informs everything. It informs our bylaws, it informs our incorporation paperwork for the IRS, it informs our theory of change, which we're going to talk about later. It's a critical statement. We just don't put it out there for the public. But I put some examples here of mission statements that achieve those three criteria, so that you all can get a good sense of other people's mission statements. And there's, of course, lots of great examples out there, and lots of great, I should have picked some bad ones to share as well. But these were three. I threw changelism just because I figured I should, if I'm being critical of other organizations, that I have to share Change Lab's mission statement as well. But I'm hoping that these kind of showcase how you can talk about the problem, who you serve through your nonprofit, and what it is that you're doing. How are you serving that community? Very critical. I'm going to move along in case you have any questions. Check the chat. We're good. This is, to me, another big component of a mission. A good mission, to me, leaves you room to explore different tactics or strategies for solving a problem, but the problem itself shouldn't shift. So if I go back to Change Labs, I don't know why it keeps going forward. If I go back to Change Lab's mission statement, empower Native American families to define and expand their own livelihoods by removing the institutional barriers to entrepreneurship, eroding social barriers, and expanding access to capital. There's a million different ways that we could remove the institutional barriers to entrepreneurship. There's not just one way. We could become a policy think tank and work with council delegates to change the bad business laws on the reservation. Or we could start a business incubator that registers all the businesses that go through that program. There's not just one thing that can be that we do. We can interpret our mission and evolve our programming to meet our mission. I think, to me, that's a really critical component of a good mission statement, is that you leave yourself the option to change your programming. Because you could find, let's say you start a nonprofit because you want to run an incubator, but let's say you find over years of running it that it's actually not as effective as you thought it was going to be. But if your mission says that that is what you do, then you're kind of stuck. That's what you got to do. So I say focus on the problem and leave your mission open to interpret the different ways that you can address that problem, so that you can, over time, like hone in and figure out how to solve the problem as you dive deeply into it. The other thing about mission and vision is that you have to, as the leader, as the nonprofit founder, you need to get really comfortable talking with all different kinds of people about this problem, why it exists, and why they should care, and learning how to illustrate in detail to all different types of people. You're going to have to be talking with donors. You're going to be having to talk to people that you want to use your services. You're going to be talking with chapter leaders. I mean, who knows? You'll be talking maybe to the vice president of the United States one day. Who knows? But it's critical that you learn how to share your mission and that story with these very distinct types of people. Somebody who knows nothing about Native American issues and has never been to the reservation, as well as somebody who lives the problem that you're trying to address day in and day out. Okay, that was all I was going to say about mission and vision. I know it's short, but I'm also, we're only here for 90 minutes and I want to make sure that there's time for Q&A. Before I go on to my first quiz, are there any questions about mission and vision before I move on? All righty, let's do a quiz, everybody, just to keep you all on your toes. If you're on your phone, it might be a little difficult for you to participate, but for those of you who are looking at this screen, sitting at their laptop or their desktop, I have a question for you. Which of these statements below about 501c3 nonprofits is false? Type your response in the chat window. So is it A, 501c3s cannot charge for their services? Is it B, 501c3s are not allowed to generate earned revenue? Or is it C, 501c3s can't pay staff more than a for-profit company? So Valerie, Liz, and Justin all say B is false. Oops, sorry. Vanessa thinks maybe it's C. Nedra thinks it's C. We got a lot of votes for B and C. Ha! Guess what, everybody? It was a trick question. All of these are false. None of them are true. I just wanted to keep you on your toes and also let you know that I play a few tricks because there's 3 more quizzes coming up, so keep that in mind. But thank you for playing this game. All of these are false. 501c3s can charge for services. It sounds like most of you believed that to be true. You can definitely generate earned revenue. Yes, you do have to be careful about where that revenue comes from, but you can definitely do it. And you can, of course, pay your staff more than a for-profit company. I look to hospitals. Hospitals, a lot of hospitals are nonprofits, a lot of universities are nonprofits, and some of them pay their people pretty darn well. All right, let's talk about my second thing or tip that you need to know before starting your nonprofit, and that's a clear definition of your tax exempt purpose. Let's talk about what that means. Unfortunately, just wanting to be good and do good things doesn't automatically qualify you for federal tax exempt status. I wish that were the case, but the IRS is the IRS, and they are very specific about what activities qualify for tax exempt status and what does not. With both nonprofits that I've run, when I applied for tax exempt status, both times we got pushback from the IRS saying, these are not tax exempt activities. Prove to us why this should be tax exempt. And that's when I had to bring in lawyers to help me craft better responses. But yeah, I mean, you could, if you think of Change Labs as a nonprofit organization, let that be a warning sign that the IRS did not want to give us our 501c3 status at the get-go. So I want to showcase here that we are specifically talking about 501c3s in about 2 or 3 slides. I'm going to pull back from that and say, maybe some of you on this call are actually interested in a 501c6, or maybe some of you are interested in a 501c4. I have a slide that just kind of briefly shows that there are other designations of nonprofits, but today, because my experience is with C3s, everything that I'm sharing today is C3s, but I'll give you a brief overview of the other types of organizations there are too, in case any of you are thinking about a different type of nonprofit. So here are the IRS guidelines specifically for C3s. And the benefit of being a 501c3 are these 2 things. It means you're exempt from federal taxes, and it also means that any donations that you get are tax deductible. So there's an incentive for people to give to your organization. So in order to qualify, you have to prove to the IRS that you meet a charitable purpose, and you do have to get specific, again, you can't just say these poor people need help. You have to say exactly what you're going to do for them, why are they considered poor, et cetera, et cetera. Religious reasons is another one. Sorry, Zoom doesn't leave me a lot of room on my screen to see everything on the slide, so I have to move things around here. Or it could be an educational purpose. Change Labs, for example, is established under an educational purpose, not a charitable purpose. And we did that very intentionally. It could be a literary purpose or preventing cruelty to animals or to children. Or it can be a scientific purpose, testing for public safety, or fostering national or international amateur sports and competitions. So if some of you are in this workshop today, you have an idea and you're reading through these, I think there's 8 things that qualify, and what you're thinking about doesn't fit under those 8, you may not be a C3, but maybe you could be a C4 or a C6. There's a whole bunch of other designations. So don't fret just yet. I'm going to move along because as Raquel said, all these slides will be online and the video will be online soon. So if I went through some of these a little bit too quickly, you can always go back and rewatch, or I can also send you a copy of the slides. So I mentioned that C3 isn't the only designation. There's also C4, social welfare organizations. Keep in mind, though, that different designations have different benefits. So C4, C6, C7s, those are only the examples I chose to share, but if you go to ChatGPT or if you go to the IRS, it spells out all the different kinds. I didn't want to go through the whole list again because we only have so much time today, but be sure to be mindful of which ones, well, all of them will make you exempt from federal taxes, but let's say you create a business league, a C6, like the Diné Chamber of Commerce is a great example. It's a 501c6. It is not, the donations to C6s are not tax deductible. So I believe, I don't know if anybody from the Diné Chamber is on this call, I believe that after they created their C6, they also went back and created a C3 for this reason. They wanted to be able to provide a deductible for donations. There's also 501c7, social and rec clubs. I was like, who would be on this call and what might they be interested in? So I picked the ones that I thought maybe would appeal to this crowd, but there are more than C3, C4, C6, C7. So if you're interested in learning about the other types of tax exempt designations that the IRS offers, there's lots of information about that online. And you can also come back to me and I can help you step through it too. I do see some things coming in the chat. I'm going to take a pause here in a second. But, oh no, that was my pause because we're going to move on to fiscal sponsorship. But before I do that, are there any questions about tax exempt purpose, the IRS? And I'll go to the chat. So Aaron's asking, can a purpose of a nonprofit be to be a fiscal sponsor for other orgs who align with your mission? How would a nonprofit be able to be a fiscal sponsor? Aaron, that is perfect timing. We're just going to talk about fiscal sponsorship. So, and I also see the request for copies of the slides. No problem. We can do that. 3 requests for copies of the slides. Great. If there's no other questions, I'm going to move on to talk about fiscal sponsorship. And if you're not familiar with that term, you're in for a fun ride. So, quiz time. Everyone get out your fingers. As soon as you incorporate your nonprofit in a U.S. state or in the Navajo Nation, you can start fundraising as a 501c3. Is it A? Yes, absolutely. Or is it B? Nope, I can't do that. Oh, we're getting a mix of A's and B's. Awesome. Yes, the question is up on the screen. I assume you guys can see my screen. I've been assuming this whole time that you guys can, so please let me know if you can't. All right, so the answer technically is B, no, you can't. Though there is, you can start fundraising. The caveat there is I put as a 501c3. You can start fundraising if you have a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor is your way of saying like, you're a project that is not yet secured 501c3 status, And you can technically raise funds, but you have to have a fiscal sponsor who can accept those funds on your behalf. So let's talk about a little, well, shoot, I should have just moved here. Until you receive your IRS determination letter approving your 501c3 status from the IRS, you may need a fiscal sponsor. And this is another nonprofit that can accept donations and receive grants on your behalf. The reason why you may want a fiscal sponsor is because of this note below. That letter, the IRS determination letter, it comes after you submit what's called Form 1023 to the IRS. It's a standard federal form. It costs $600 to file it. You only have to do it once. But that processing that form, I've heard of organizations getting it done in a month. I've heard my first organization, it took 9 months. With Change Labs, it took April, May, June, July, August, September, October. It took 8 months. And in between that time frame, the IRS sent me a letter saying, like, we don't believe your responses. You need to prove this further. So then I would have to hire a lawyer in that time frame, reevaluate my responses and resubmit. They don't make you pay a second time around to resubmit. But the less clear the language is in your Form 1023, in your bylaws, in your incorporation paperwork, the longer it may take for you to receive this IRS determination letter. So if you're starting a nonprofit now and you know that you have a donor that's just itching to give you $25,000, you probably need a fiscal sponsor if you want to accept that money right away. Okay. Oh yeah, there's Joe. Joe saying like, this is my life right now. Totally get it. Okay, so I think I kind of inferred now what a fiscal sponsorship is, but if in case we need to spell it out a little bit more, here we go. It's an established nonprofit organization that provides financial and administrative services to a project or group that does not yet have its own IRS determination letter. This relationship allows the sponsored project, your budding nonprofit, to receive grants and donations that are typically available only to tax-exempt organizations, and the fiscal sponsor takes on the legal and financial responsibility for the funds. I think I have this coming up. Oh yeah, so things to consider when, like if you're feeling like this is you and you're like, okay, I guess I need a fiscal sponsor. Here's what you need to think about. Because not every nonprofit is a great fiscal sponsor fit for you. If it were me, Change Labs had a fiscal sponsor, and I'm happy to share what that relationship looked like. But do they have the capacity and experience sponsoring other organizations? There are, to Erin's point, there are nonprofits that exist, like they're in the business of fiscal sponsorship. They have everything in place. They have processes, they have policies, they have templates of all the contracts. It'd be very easy to work with an organization that does this for a living. And then like when Change Labs, when we got an Arizona fiscal sponsor, we sponsored with an organization that had never done it before, and that took time. They had to hire a lawyer. They had to like draft procedures and policies, and we had to wait for them to do all of that. The second thing to consider is how much are they going to charge you? And I put in my experience, what typical fiscal sponsorship fees look like. It's the lowest I've seen is actually 4%, but even then I think the board members balked when they learned that the executive director agreed to a 4% fee, fiscal sponsorship fee. I've heard as low as 5%. And then in San Francisco, I met fiscal sponsors that were charging 15%. So like if you brought in $10, your fiscal sponsor would take 5% of that $10, or they could take up to 15%. And that's something that you would negotiate with them. The third thing I would consider is where they're located. I actually don't know the legal stuff around this, how easy or difficult or whatever, or legal it is to work with a fiscal sponsor that's not in the same place that you are. For me though, it's just like, it's a sense of streamlining interactions. Working with a fiscal sponsor who's in your region or in your state will probably make your life easier. The fourth thing to consider is insurance. Who is liable if your project or your budding nonprofit does something totally awry, or they totally mess up your finances. Who is liable? Do you need insurance? Do they need you to have it? Inquire about, liability and who needs to have what in order for this relationship to work. And then the last one here is that this is a contract. It's a legally binding contract between your organization and the sponsor. They will likely give you, or you can help produce a contract, but make sure that you know it inside and out, especially since money is involved here and you're building a relationship with these donors that you hope will give to you again. So if your fiscal sponsor messes things up and ruins your ability to raise funds, that's a big deal. So make sure you understand in that contract, like who is responsible for what and know how you're going to work with them. I'm going to pause because I see some movement in the chat. Okay, these are some things that I will come back to because I think, do I have one more about fiscal sponsorship? Oh, I don't, but I shared a screenshot here of the fiscal sponsorship between Change Labs and our first sponsor. And I'm happy to share this with anybody who wants to read an example of a fiscal sponsorship. I recently was coaching a nonprofit leader and she had a fiscal sponsor, but they had no written agreement between them. And that was a little worrisome for me. I think you should get everything down on paper and it should be signed so that everybody is clear as to who is doing what. Again, especially since money is involved and it impacts the future of your organization. Oakley dokley. Any more questions about fiscal sponsors? If not, we'll move on to how to get funds. All right, Mackenzie, I see your request for a sample. Maybe we'll just button up a bunch of these examples and send it out over an email. And then somebody asked earlier, how do you get your first funds? I'm going to kind of talk about that. The Change Labs is a terrible example because we had a huge luxury right at the get-go. But I'm going to talk more about the importance of diversification. So since we're all chat happy and warmed up now, I want to know from you all, what are your plans for how your organization will generate income? Because I think it'll be good for everybody in here to learn. You're all budding nonprofit leaders, how you all are thinking about this challenge of raising enough money to sustain your organization. So tell us all. You don't have to give away any secrets. If you have secrets, you can be generic, but just tell us, how do you plan to generate income? Because if you all write grants, I think it's gonna give me some knowledge for these next few slides. Whereas if all of you wrote that you're gonna sell organs or something like that, then I'll have a completely different take on the next few slides. Okay, selling native art, gala events, writing letters, fantastic. Grants, Liz is all grants, requesting for donations, fundraisers. Cool. Okay. Golf tournaments, corporate sponsorships, donations, fundraise, rental fees. Great. Grants. Grants is probably the most common. Charging for services, fantastic. Can you have, absolutely can have subscribers, grants and requests for donations. It sounds like we're all on the same wavelength here. No one is thinking something crazy or dramatic. Here's all the different ways. No, this isn't all of them. I'm sure there's many more than this. But I asked ChatGPT to brainstorm with me, and these were what we came up with. These are many of the different ways that nonprofits can bring in money. I think I'm going to go through each of them if you guys don't mind, but I promise I'll be fast. I just want to make sure we all know what these things are. So contracts would be like if you're started a nonprofit and it was hired by the Navajo Nation to do something, to run workshops or to provide a service. Somebody asked about membership fees and dues. Absolutely. I think a lot of big nonprofits, I'm thinking the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, most of their money comes in from membership dues and fees. Rental income. Kelsey mentioned that somebody's renting out space. We do that here at Change Labs. Being able to accept donations from individual donors. If you have licensing and royalties, grants, different types of grants. There's government grants, there's foundation grants, there's corporate grants. If you charge a fee for your program, if you crowdfund, if you are selling, like let's say you make shirts for, sorry, there's an echo. Give me just a second. Raquel, there's an echo coming from your machine. La 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 la. Oh, I think it disconnected from your headphones. Just a second, everybody. We're just have an echo issue here. Okay. It could be sales of products, like say you're selling t-shirts with your artwork on them, or a social enterprise like Change Labs here. We have, for any of you who've ever visited our space in Tuba City, we have this weird room that we're trying to turn into a social enterprise, a coffee shop. You can do that as a nonprofit. You can earn money off of your investments. So this is when you get a little bit bigger. But let's say you have the luxury of having 24 months of runway in your nonprofit budget. You could absolutely put some of that money in a short-term investment and capitalize on those yields. That just becomes earned income for your organization. That's how nonprofits build endowments for their sustainability. You could have a referral program. Maybe another organization pays you for every whatever you send their way. In-kind donations. It could be products or services. People mentioned fees like galas and fundraisers. So anything that you charge for those events or any sponsorships that you get for those events. Partnerships and joint ventures. This is the last one. So Change Labs has an example of this now. We have a partnership with a clothing company where we get 5% of every dollar sold. Yeah, 5% of every dollar sold of their clothing line. So there's lots of different ways that your organization can bring in income. And just to double down on that, I've highlighted in orange, like Change Labs isn't that old of an organization. This is our 5th year. All the ones in orange are the strategies that we use to bring in money. Okay. Any questions about the different ways that you can generate income as a nonprofit? So because I'm keeping my eye on the chat, but I'm gonna move along, because so many of you said that grants were one of the ways that you're thinking about bringing in money initially, which is a great strategy. Here, I put together some questions that I see very frequently on all of our grant applications to give you all a heads up on, like, if that's your strategy, then here's the things that you really need to know about your organization. And I think it's also worth noting too that most grant applications I've seen, probably 85% of them, extend grants to fiscally sponsored projects and organizations. And maybe a smaller percentage, only 15 of the ones that we've applied for, say that they're not looking to support fiscally sponsored projects. So that is to say that it's my belief that most of the grants that exist out there do extend to fiscally sponsored organizations and projects. So if you're thinking about grants, have a sense of who's in your organizational leadership. What roles do they play? Why are those the best people for that? That comes up all the time. You need to be able to describe the demographics of your community really, really well. That's there's a lot of great data out there now. So if any of you want to talk about that, let me know. This one comes up a lot too. How does the organization ensure its programming is informed by the community you serve? This one to me always makes me chuckle because I think there are lots of nonprofits that are not based in the communities that they serve, or they serve international populations, but they're based in the US. It makes me chuckle because this is totally not Change Lab's problem, and probably not for many of you too, but still you have to be able to speak to it really well. This one too, I feel like it's such a trend now. All the donors want to know about DEI. How does your organization integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies to deliver services? To me, too, this is a reaction to too many white-led nonprofits with white employees that serve non-white communities. I do not feel that this is a bigger problem for nonprofits on the reservation. But again, you need to know how to answer a question like this and know how to speak to their various DEI strategies. What is your theory of change? If you've never heard of that term before, we're going to talk about that. But they definitely want to know how you define your impact and how, going into the next question, how do you measure progress towards that impact? And then this one drives me insane, but explain how your organization will become financially sustainable. It drives me insane because I don't feel like economic justice will be solved with a few grant dollars. And I get annoyed that, anyhow, I won't go into my rant, but you do need to know how to answer this question. I'm going to move on. And these are also, in addition to all the narrative questions, there's a lot of them have the same type of documents that they want you to submit or have on hand. So who's on your team? What are their resumes? How much money do you need? What is the organizational budget and what is the budget that you're asking for? Most donors don't want to pay 100% for your project. They want to know, like, we're putting in 30%, another 30% is coming from here, and then they're putting it together, or they're bringing in another 30% from over here. 2 to 3 years of financial statements. I do think there is forgiveness for this when you're just getting started, but ensuring that you have good accounting in place and bookkeeping, and that you're getting in all of your tax statements on time is critical for donors. They want to know who else is giving and how much are they giving. Like if they're giving you $250,000 and you've only ever managed $5,000 grants, they're probably going to want to know what policies you have in place to manage that type of money. Tax filings, a list of your board members, their affiliations, just to make sure that you're not just putting all your family members on your board, and also term limits. Are people leaving the board, or has it been the same board members for like 60 years? Yeah, I see some movement again in the chat, so I'm gonna pause here. Oh, okay, Joe's just making some good comments. Thank you, Joe. I had one more on this. Things to consider when raising donations or pursuing grants. I just mentioned this one, but let's say you have your organizational budget for 2025 is 100,000. Funders, you could certainly ask for 100,000, but they usually don't like to be the only one at the party. They want to know that, for sustainability reasons, they want to know that you have other ways of getting money. So asking one donor for 100% of your whole budget usually doesn't fly. Similarly, here's other, like, I do think, especially as Native people with lived experience on the reservation, we know our challenge well, and we can get very detailed on the problem. I say this because we've done this at Change Labs, where we've almost talked our way out of a grant because we made them feel like the problem could never be solved. We're like, oh, this problem is so hard, it's so complex, it's existed for decades and it's never made a dent. I'm like, okay, well then how are you going to solve it? So, and again, I think this too is just like a tendency to shy away from boosting yourself, from talking about your achievements and how badass you are. But you have to get comfortable with that. Like, why are you the best person to do this? What are your strengths? What are the organization's strengths? What has it achieved? What is cool and innovative about the solutions that you're offering? Yes, the problem is super important, but if you're writing a grant application, don't spend more time talking about the problem than you do talking about how the awesomeness of your organization and how it's poised to deliver solutions. This is another big learning for me, is you also can't underestimate, most of these donors have never been to a reservation. They have no idea about Indigenous life or challenges. You have like 200 words to not only talk about the problem and the solution, but also educate them on the Indigenous experience. It's hard. I have to say, it is hard, but that'll be part of your role as a grant writer, as a nonprofit leader, is to be able to bring them, to show them this issue and why it's so important. It's just unfortunate a lot of Indigenous communities are pretty invisible. So a lot of people honestly just don't know. I can't tell you how many donors I've talked to who don't even appreciate the percentage of people that don't have electricity on their reservation. They just assume that we have a lot of basic things that we don't. So don't underestimate that too when you're talking with a donor. And then the last one that I have here is, it's kind of a biggie, but reporting requirements. Federal grants are very exciting, but the reporting requirements on federal grants, especially for a young organization, can be astounding. So like the USDA requires quarterly reports. So if you're small and you have these tiny projects, federal grants can provide some stability, but you may, I know this is a luxury, but you may be better off looking for like family foundation grants or individual donors, and then working up to something like a federal grant. A lot of individual donors, of course, don't have any reporting requirements, and a lot of family foundations have minimal to no reporting requirements as well. And that's really great when you're just getting started. Okay, I'm gonna do a time check here. Oh, wow, we only have 30 minutes left, guys. Let me breeze through. I see a bunch of stuff coming in on the chat, but I swear this is 5. I'm almost done after this. And then we're gonna go back through. You guys can like upvote some of these questions in the chat window too, because if we don't have time to get to all the questions, maybe I can pull out the ones that have the most thumbs up or the most hearts or the most smiley faces. So let's talk about this last one. How do you define success? Oh, I wrote this statement. Nonprofit leaders do what they do because they are passionate about their cause and their community. But philanthropy doesn't care about that at all. They don't want, they fund results, they fund impact. So what tips do I have for that here? I have a question for you guys. I don't think I have any more quizzes. No more tricks. So go ahead and type in the chat if you have a nonprofit or an idea for a nonprofit, doesn't matter. When you guys think about organizational impact or success, what comes to mind? So go ahead and type your thoughts in the chat. And I'm going to look at some of these questions while you guys do that. Why are we talking about Taylor Swift so much in this chat? What is going on? Is that all Joe? That's Joe. The number of families or students we helped. Yes. Sustainability. Vague, but yes. Measurable change or improvements. Yes, Liz. I'm wondering what kind of measurable change. Helping people create solutions. Yes, but vague. Vague is fine for now. I didn't ask you to do like SMART goals, which is another great tool, but we're not going to talk about that today. Success is longevity for the organization, decades long. Okay, Nedra, curious to hear more about that. Increase and improve availability of information and resources that are culturally relevant. Ah, Erin, you're speaking to my heart. Okay, I'm going to move on. I see more coming in, but it sounds, again, like we're all on the same page here. None of you had these answers, which is great. Well, maybe some of you kind of had this a little bit. I put, these are earnest, great answers that will not help you get grant funds. Sad face, crying. Getting paid to do what I love. But funders don't care about that. I'm able to serve my community. They don't care about that either. Providing a needed resource in my community. Yeah. So if these are answers where you're leaning towards, it's just about getting more specific about what it is that you're offering. And I mean, many of you wrote this, but how you measure it. And my co-founder, Jessica Stego, who's in the other room leading a wonderful session on NSBCI right now, she said this to me about 18 months ago, and it was great. And I know this intrinsically, but I just appreciate that she just articulated it in 7 words. We cannot change what we cannot measure. So true. So if your nonprofit is trying to change something, you need to know what it is that you're trying to change and figure out how to measure it. And that ability to measure is what's going to make it easier for you to raise money for your nonprofit. Let's talk about, this is where the theory of change comes in. So if you all don't know what a theory of change is, or if it's a relatively newish term for you, I've put in a quick definition here, and we have the Change Labs theory of change is up on our website, just our URL /impact. Is it / or is it /? I've heard it both ways. Anyhow, a theory of change is a tool that you use to map out the steps required to achieve a goal that leads to social and environmental impact. It can help you understand the connection between your nonprofit's activities, outputs, outcomes, and the broader impact it aims to achieve. It's like a framework for your logic, like how you're going to get from I'm running a business incubator to the impact that you actually want to have. Let's say your impact is to diversify Navajo economies. A business incubator might be a great way to do that, but what is the rationale? What is the thinking to get from that A to B? So theory of change equals DEI. Haha. All right, I'm going to move along, Joseph, but I love your commentary in the chat. So I'm going to use Change Labs again as an example here. Let's say your goal or your mission is to build generational wealth within Native communities and diversify Native economies by promoting and enabling entrepreneurship. Clean cut, easy. So in this, again, going back to that whole discussion we had about mission and vision, to me, a great mission and vision leaves the door open for multiple things that you could do to achieve that goal. If we wanted to build generational wealth in Native communities, I can think of 5 things off the top of my head that could be done. There's probably hundreds of things that could be done. There's not just one silver bullet, not one solution that's going to fix it all. And in reality, probably a lot of things need to be done at the same time in order to build generational wealth within our communities. So I like that as a goal because it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. The outcome, this is one of the actual outcomes that we've defined for Change Labs. And an outcome is the short or the long-term change we want to see. Now, I can visualize your Zoom eyes glazing over right now because we're talking about all these outcomes, outputs, indicators. Hold on, stay with me, because I do think that this is the thing that is least talked about for nonprofits in terms of being able to generate grant funding. I can't tell you how many grants we're able to generate just because we have a great theory of change that is very measurable. So the shorter long-term change that we want to see for Change Labs, one of them, we have 4 of them, is increase access to physical and financial capital for businesses on the res. Increasing access to physical and financial capital. That's one of the short/long-term changes that we want to see. The activity, what are we going to do to achieve that outcome? We're doing a lot of different activities, but one of them is design culturally relevant loan products and financial education for entrepreneurs on the reservation. So then the next step after that is, if we do this activity well, what is the tangible result? And I was reflecting on this a little earlier. This might be a bad example because in this one, the activity and the output are kind of the same, but in some of our other models, the activity and the output are very, very different. But in this case, the output of the activity, the tangible thing, is that we have a program. It's called Kinship Lending. Raquel told you guys about it earlier. And it provides information about financial products. It also offers loans, and it's delivering that culturally relevant financial education. Okay. And then the last one is the indicator. What will you track and measure on some basis to determine whether or not this activity that you've defined actually leads to this outcome. So this is where some of you guys were starting to list really great indicators. So for us, when we think about kinship lending, we have about 30 indicators that we track for that program that help us understand whether or not we're increasing access to financial capital. So these are just examples of what we have: the number of loans dispersed, the total amount of money deployed, the percent of borrowers who are up to date on their payments. These sound very basic and simple. This logic, though, is really critical. And the indicators that you develop at the end, this is what donors want to know. They want to know, what are you trying to achieve and how are you measuring it? And they may even ask, like what frequency are you using surveys? They may want to get into the details, but having answers for these questions is really important, or it's been important to Change Labs. Oh, wait, I skipped one. The most important one: assumptions. Assumptions are the underlying beliefs about how and why the change will occur. Everything that you're thinking of for your nonprofit activity right now has a million assumptions built into it, and it's really critical that you recognize your own bias and your own thinking has assumptions baked into it. So I feel like Change Labs gets a lot of cred for offering loans, but we're operating under the assumption that there's even enough entrepreneurs on the reservation that even are interested in loans. I think we all know in this call that people are wary of borrowing money from somebody else. So we may have the best loan program in the world, but I'm not saying that we do. I'm just saying we could. Like, you guys, you too could have the best loan program in the world. But if there's not enough entrepreneurs, or there's not enough, there's like a cultural mind block to that program, then it doesn't matter. You built a project on not factoring in you made an assumption that is going to derail your ability to deliver those outcomes. Okay. Ooh, you guys made it through that. I think this is the last thought on this. If pursuing grant funding, what evidence or data can you provide to the funder that illustrates your nonprofit's impact? This type of framework, this is that evidence. This is that data. And it's also good for you too, to know these things as a nonprofit leader. If you spend all of your time and energy and passion doing something, and then you measure it and it turns out like it makes me feel good, but it's not actually doing anything for this problem, then you know to try something else. You've gained that knowledge and that experience, and now you can evolve and try new things. It's really, to me, that's one of the things I love about Change Labs, is like, we're always trying different things because of this. All right. I see some stuff in the chat, but I do want to leave a little bit of time for more Q&A. So I think this is I mentioned that the outcome that I shared was just one of 4 that we have. I just wanted to hammer this home again. Maybe this is overkill here, but these are the actual all 4 outcomes that we're trying to achieve at Change Labs: increasing access to physical and financial capital, social capital, human capital, and increasing economic agency. And these are the activities that we choose to do. This is our theory. Our assumption is that if we do these things, that we can increase those 4 things. And in case you're wondering, we do change our activities all the time. Some of you might have known us long enough to know that we used to have an artist residency program. We dropped that because we weren't able to get it back to our outcomes. Some of you know that the incubator program used to be like 12 months long. And now, for those of you in this newest cohort, it's only 6 months long. There was reasoning for all of those decisions. So again, the problem you're trying to solve never changes, but the things that you do, the activities, those can change at any time. And if you change them, it should be because you have established your outcomes, you've established your indicators, you're seeing that things aren't lining up. And so you're like, okay, this artist residency, it's not actually achieving the results that we thought it would. It's really fun. We love engaging with the artists, but it's not actually making a dent on our mission. We should recommend that to a different organization, and we need to find another way to create this impact that we're trying to create. Ooh, somebody wants to make us part of the Navajo Nation government. I don't know about that. Oh, it's Joe again. Joe, stick with the Taylor Swift comments. Just joking, Joe. Hope I still see you tonight. Okay. Oh, shoot. I keep thinking that that was my last slide on indicators, but no, I think this one is though. I mentioned that each of our programs has 20 to 25 indicators that we measure for each program. I wanted to prove that to you because I was worried you guys be like, she's not being real right now. We do, we really do. So the screen is showing our kinship lending results framework. And you'll see here, like we have all the outcomes, we have all our outputs and all the different indicators that we use to track those outputs and outcomes. And then we also establish goals for each of the indicators. All righty. Now I think, over time, expect to try multiple activities or programs in order to figure out what works and what doesn't. We call this prototyping. Yes, I think we've already nailed that down. Yes, these slides will be available. The recording will be on our YouTube channel shortly. So that was the end, but we got those questions in the beginning about Arizona, Navajo, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to do a review of the logistics for those of you who are at the beginning stages of your journey. Here's my little checklist. Before you incorporate your nonprofit, this slide will be available. I don't know if I should talk through this, but if I were thinking about like an order of operations, and I want to say again, I'm not a lawyer. I've gone through this process twice myself. I've seen other people go through it. This is what I would suggest to people. But of course, you're going to be on your own timeline, on your own journey, and you'll have your own experiences. For me, it always starts with a mission and vision, and then that informs your business plan. Yes, you should absolutely have a business plan for your nonprofit. Remember, you're a nonprofit corporation. So your business plan should, at the very least, like define that problem. What is it? What is the problem you want to solve, and why does it exist? And once you write this into your business plan, you can use that for your grant writing because you'll be asked that question over and over and over again. What are your services? To whom? How do you know? What evidence do you have that people want this service that you're offering? How are you going to make money? What resources do you need? In your financial plan, how much is it going to cost? Like build your cash flow. What is it going to cost to run this organization the first year, in the second year, in the third year? And those are going to be different because your organization will grow over time. And how much income do you need to sustain those costs? Then your bylaws. There's lots of great, I'm happy to send you all Change Labs bylaws if you want a starting point. The Arizona Corporation Commission, and I think in New Mexico too, are very straightforward about what you need in your bylaws. It's well documented on the internet. Determine who's going to be listed on your board for your incorporation paperwork and who's going to be your registered agent. I'm going to move on, even though there may be questions about what a registered agent is. You can be your own registered agent if you're starting your nonprofit in the same state where you're operating. And if you're not, then we should talk afterwards. Then after those things, again, these are just the logistical things. If you're starting a nonprofit that doesn't operate on the reservation, let's say you're in Flagstaff and you're starting a nonprofit and you're like, I can't think of an example. Shoot. Maybe you're offering a reading program for kids in Flagstaff, for Native kids in Flagstaff. You're not actually operating on Navajo. You would need to get your EIN. You can incorporate in the state of Arizona, because this is a Flagstaff example, and then you can go ahead and file your Form 1023 with the IRS. Let's say you're starting a nonprofit and you're in Tuba City, you would still go through the same steps, secure your EIN, you would incorporate your nonprofit with the tribe and with the state that you're based in. You technically don't need to do the state if you're only operating on the reservation. I think it's still worth doing it though, especially if you're in Arizona, because it's so easy in Arizona. And I'm happy to meet with people about that. And then you would file your Form 1023 with the IRS. You can be registered in many states. I mentioned that ChangeLab is registered in 3 US states and on the Navajo Nation. So it depends on where you're operating, where your employees are. You'll be required to register wherever you are conducting business. Navajo Nation, Arizona, New Mexico, etc. I swear I'm gonna stop, but this is really important because I imagine a lot of people on this call are in Arizona. An important note about Arizona Nonprofit Incorporation. Thank goodness the lawyer we are working with flagged this. But then ChatGPT is very aware of this. My favorite nonprofit resource is that website Nolo. I think it's nolo.com. All of this is documented to death on there. So there's plenty of resources out there to help you avoid this pitfall. I mentioned that it's really easy to register in Arizona. The AZ Corporation Commission basically just has you fill out a form. And that's all you got to do. So easy. However, in this paragraph here, it does not include their form. I don't know why they don't fix this. It does not include language required by the IRS to obtain 501c3 tax exempt status. So you need to create your own articles if you're incorporating your nonprofit in the state of Arizona. And the articles that you create need to incorporate these 3 clauses, or else the IRS is going to flag you and say that you're missing these, and then you'll have to amend your articles, which will just add more time to getting your nonprofit status. So you need to incorporate a statement of purpose that limits the org to 1 or more of the tax exempt purposes, those things that we talked about: scientific, God, charity, education. Yeah. And again, I think I've put in here, I'm happy to send this to you all, but here's ChangeLab's articles where we explicitly outline that in Article 2. And then secondly, you have to include a statement that your nonprofit will not engage in activities unrelated to exempt purposes. It's funny to me that the Arizona form doesn't have this on it, but it doesn't. So I've outlined here where we have that in our articles. And then the last one, the Arizona Corporation Commission form also does not include a dissolution clause, which basically says if you kill your nonprofit, that you commit to dedicating all of your assets to another nonprofit. So if your nonprofit dies and you have like a bunch of desks and computers and some money, you have to commit to the IRS that you're gonna give those assets to another nonprofit. You can't just keep it for yourself. And that's not in the Arizona corporation form. So we added that into our articles here so that we could get our IRS designation. Okay. This is not a too inspiring quote. Do any of you watch The Bear, the show on, I think it's on FX? Cool. Somebody here watches The Bear. So in the last episode, I think we're on season 3 now. This latest season that came out, Chef Terry gave a quote in like the last scene of the show, and I loved it so much. She said, you have no idea what you're doing and therefore you're invincible. I thought that was a great way to end this because I think it's great that you all are learning about this, but there is definitely some magic into not knowing some of this too, so that you don't know what you're getting into, so that you don't talk yourself out of it, because you should definitely charge ahead. And we need more nonprofits on the reservation, and you are invincible right now if you're in that beginning stage. Okay. So I do see you guys need to help me with some of these questions here. Raquel mentioned that we all do coaching. So please maybe we can put in the chat how to schedule an appointment with any of our coaches. But if you we're pushing on time here, but if you want to talk about any of these things more, then follow up with us, book an appointment online, book an appointment with me. And now let's get to some of this stuff in the chat. Oh God. Ooh, wait, what's going on here? Okay, there's conversations about Rocket Lawyer. Can you transition to a nonprofit in the middle of a fiscal year? Wait, can you use online services like Rocket Lawyer to create documents, or is in-person lawyer the best? I've never used Rocket Lawyer. Has anybody else on this call used Rocket Lawyer for their nonprofit? Maybe we can help out Mackenzie here. I've never tried it, so I couldn't say. I will put in, I'm putting in the chat the name of a nonprofit attorney. She's in California. She's native. Seba Legal. I can't remember her name right now, but she helped us with our incorporation paperwork for Change Labs because we knew at the get-go that we wanted to eventually create for-profit subsidiaries. And so we wanted her help incorporating that into all of our articles at the get-go. And then Joe Austin, he might kill me for putting his name in here. He's down in Tucson. He's Navajo. I think it's Austin Law Firm. He's our lawyer now. And I don't know if he does nonprofit incorporation, but I feel like he would talk to anybody. He's amazing and fantastic. Any tips on recruiting an engaged board when there are restraints on everyone's time? Oh gosh, if any of you have tips on that for Aaron, please type it in the chat. I feel like that is the never-ending struggle as a nonprofit leader. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I feel like we have a great board at Change Labs, but I am constant, like, I know they don't have any time. But on the one hand, it's like, I want people on our board that have clout and who are in the know about a bunch of things. Like Jackson Brossi's on our board. He's amazing. Yes, I can get his time on text, but I can't get him to like show up in Tuba City and do all this stuff with our community. But man, I don't have a good answer for that. I can just tell you that I don't know a single nonprofit leader that doesn't struggle with that challenge. What about when deciding whether to complete the 1023 or 1023 EZ? I think the 1023 EZ limits you to, like, you can't bring over a certain amount in grants. I'm almost positive that's what it is. So it depends on your idea and your, like, if you go and build out your business plan and you say like, there's plenty of nonprofits out there that operate on a very minimal budget because they do like one thing and it doesn't cost a lot of money, or they engage all volunteers. If you think that's going to be you, then a 1023 EZ might be the way to go. It just depends on what it is that you're doing and how much money you need for it. Sorry, I'm looking for more questions. Oh my. Thank you guys for, oh yes, Tata. Thank you guys for answering each other's questions too. If you guys, feel free to unmute yourself at this point. If there's a question in here, that you think we should talk about, I don't even know where to start.
Heather,
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
when is Change Labs going to host a Taylor Swift fundraiser on the rest?
What is with the Taylor Swift? Raquel will get on that. She's connected to all the entertainers and she puts on concerts. We'll get Taylor out to the res.
Hey Heather, question, it's Fran. What is a good number for like a board of directors? I know in the beginning you were like, they like to, you have to list them and relationship status and all that, but what do you feel as a comfortable number?
I put the question back on you because they're kind of your bosses. How many bosses do you want to have? I'm always astounded. Let's put it this way. I'm always astounded when I see a board where there's like 20 people. I just like, oh my God, I just can't, I don't even talk to 20 people in 5 years. How would I be able, because you want to maintain a good relationship with your board as the executive director. You want it, you want to be able to build like trust with all of these people. We have 6 at Change Labs and I'm one of them. So I only have to keep up a relationship with 5 people. And I'll also say, I had a donor question us earlier on, because I think we've always had about 6 board members. There was a time when there was more board members than there were staff. And they were like, that is really strange. So I think you also want to be mindful of your board size relative to the size of the organization. But I think it also can be, you also need to consider in like let's say your nonprofit exists to serve Shanto, but your board has nobody from Shanto on it. Or I think you also need to think about who it is that you're serving and what kind of stakeholder representation is needed on the board. I don't think there's any magical answer to that question. I think you just have to consider all of these different things and decide for yourself. And the board too, as your boss, may also decide and say like, we need 20 more people. And here's why. You, executive director, bring on 20 more board members. So be sure to hire people that you definitely want to be your boss. Hire people to bring people that you want to be your boss. Okay, so you need, what key business skills do you think are good to develop within yourself and your team? I touched on these a little bit. Oh gosh, guys, I'm sorry. I know we're at time. You are a nonprofit leader. And I think a lot of people aren't comfortable with that leader part. You got to get comfortable with it. You got to be able to do like public speak, motivate, encourage, foster. You've got to learn all that language, and you've got to learn how to multitask. Everybody's good at that already, but you've got to learn to bring on help too. Like, I think Change Labs got a lot stronger when we brought in a grant writer and when we worked with more and more graphic designers to improve our messaging, photographers, Kelsey, videography, it's work to bring on like a big web and nebula of contractors and employees, but that capacity was needed in order to get the organization to that next level. So there's always this balance of like, well, everything's going to cost money. How am I going to do that? And when we're stuck in the scarcity mindset where like, well, I only have $10,000. I don't want to spend it on that. And you can bind yourself up into not spending the money at all, or being so frugal that you can't advance the company. You as a leader have to figure out how you are going to get comfortable, like spending money and investing in the business, even if it means like that you're spending down your money. You got to do it. It's the only way to grow. And I think that's a really hard mindset to get over. Delphina has her hand raised. Go ahead, Delphina.
Good afternoon. I just had questions. Like, I know next week, I think we're going to have a nonprofit presenter, Valerie. I think it's nice. Maybe we can have a panel of nonprofit owners, not only Navajos, but other intertribals. Just an example, because I'm still kind of toying with being a nonprofit I want to eventually evolve that way as well. It's just that I just can't find really good ones, or I do see them through my Facebook feed and check our grassroots organizations. And then when I do my own internal audits, half of them are not even nonprofit. They're just put out their Venmo, PayPal for these causes, but you're kind of weary if you should even do that. I just like to get more, maybe in the future, do another actual panels that people are actually running these programs. Because we do have a lot of how many board members, how much is it really going to cost year one? Are they making under $50,000 worth of profits? Is that sustainable, in Indian country to run the business and it's slowly growing? If you're starting at 50,000, are you just going to increase another 5,000 year two? Is it worthwhile to try to do that for the community? And things like that, just collaborating with resources, just like you, Change Lab and other, Arizona resources is kind of what I want like actual owners that can tell us what their experiences are.
Yeah, I love that. Delphina, you also asked a question about whether or not you can establish a nonprofit on Navajo through business regulatory?
I
Absolutely.
saw your link on the other
yeah.
side, but
Yeah.
I was just asking if there's no, I believe, I am just wondering, I think you skip the business regulatory versus for profit. You have to get your business license and stuff. I think that process is skipped. And you just pretty much can start the business right away, your nonprofit business, from my understanding. I guess that's kind of.
You would incorporate your nonprofit on the Navajo Nation as a foreign or a domestic entity. There's paperwork for that. And as of this year, or maybe end of last year, Navajo nonprofits can also get certified as well. So Change Labs is now a priority to Navajo controlled nonprofit. Like 2 years ago, our Navajo nonprofits couldn't be on the preference list, but now we can. So if any of you are thinking about doing contracts with the tribe as a nonprofit, I highly, highly recommend that you become a priority 2 organization, which means you would have to register through business regulatory. We are at time, guys. I think there's still quite a bit of questions, and I apologize. I talked too long. But we have a fallback for that. We have coaching. And I love this idea of maybe doing a nonprofit panel. I think, oh gosh, I'm sorry. My Navajo's terrible. The Knott's Lead Initiative, I was talking with them last week. I think they're planning on putting together kind of a nonprofit panel in the coming months. And I offered my support to get that up and running. But I know that there's organizations on the same wavelength. Okay, everybody, thank you guys for coming, and see you at Valerie's amazing workshop coming up soon. Bye, everybody.